Hi, and welcome back to another one of my live matches. This time I'm back at Heronbrook Fisheries for the Saturday Open, which was on Meadow pools and bridge pools. For some reason there was only 5 pegs on bridge and there was 15 pegs on Meadow. Now when I went to draw, everybody else had drawn, there was only 1 peg left in the bag, and Dean the owner made me pay my money before he showed me what peg I'd been left with. And he had a bit of a chuckle about him as well. I wasn't quite sure why, but anyway, as soon as he told me the peg I was on, I realised why. Because I keep drawing this peg and I don't like it. It's Meadow 22. I've been on it at least 3 times this year and I've not done any good off it any time. It's not a very good peg. It has thrown up one weight this year, but he had the whole straight to himself. Whether that made any difference, I don't know. But I still feel like I've got plenty of room on the peg. Well, it's not one you'd run to, put it that way. Anyway, I started the match over on grain bait and maggots, just feeding grain bait, loose grain bait, and putting 3 red maggots on the hook. Started with a large toss pot, dropped some in and laid the rigging behind it, and nothing came into it. So I tried a big pot of grain bait and still nothing. So that left me a little concerned. But the fish were spawning on the pool on Saturday, and some pegs were absolutely alive with fish in the edges. My peg had a few fish spawning down my left-hand edge. It's got a bit of a weed bed. It's quite deep off the end of this weed bed. It's probably nearly 5 foot deep off the end of this weed bed. And I decided to throw casters at it and hope that once they'd finished spawning, they'd have a bit of a feed. Depending how long it'd take them to finish the spawn as to how quick I'd start catching. In the meantime, I decided to discard the far line because the wind got horrific. I just couldn't present nothing properly. So I decided to fish a close range match basically. So top 2 and 2 would probably be the furthest line I'd go. Fishing meat out my hand at top 2 and 2, and then obviously throwing casters to the weed bed to my left, and then going 4 sections, top kit plus 4 sections to my left, which I found a bit of a flat spot, but it was still quite deep. But I tried there with, first of all, I tried there with pellets and never had no joy. So I thought I'll put some grain bait there to see if I can get something to come into the peg. And I did. I had a carp and then an F1 on corn over grain bait. But it got a little bit messy, like I say, because it was a bit deep. So I've gone to my right to do the same. I tried pellets first. I hadn't got any maggots with me. I'd only got some hooker maggots. I mean, after the match, I spoke to a few people and they'd caught on dead maggots, so that definitely would have been an option. If I wish I'd have took some with me, but I hadn't got none in the fridge, so there you go. But anyway, I've gone to my right, doing the same, feeding grain bait and fishing corn over the top. And I was ticking over. It wasn't brilliant. I was just having odd fish. I mean, the first 2 and 3 hours were pretty slow, to be fair. There was a lot of fish about, like I say, on a lot of the pool with fish spawning. And you don't really want to be going anywhere near them because them doing their thing. So I'm fishing away from it and feeding to the wee bed, like I say, hoping that at some point they'll start having a feed. They like a bit of cover when it's nice and bright anyway. And doesn't matter if it's down the edge. As long as you've got a bit of depth there, you will catch shallow. So like I say, I just kept throwing casters there and then rotating these 3 lines short. I mean, look, in the video, it looks early doors. You can see that it's not that windy, but it did get really windy later on. Other than that, it was a lovely day. I mean, I was in my flip-flops, never felt cold or anything like that. And it was just a nice day, nice pleasant day, other than the wind. But the fishing was a bit hard. I mean, some pegs were catching well, but I never expected to catch that much from here. Just kept going either way, just catching the odd fish here and there. Never bagging, but, catching a few. The left-hand line, once it got a bit messy with the grain bait, I switched it to meat, trickling a few pieces of meat and a fishing a piece on the hook. And this brought me a few extra fish. Got a bit of energy about him as well at the minute. The meat worked for a few fish,
Yeah, boy, we're off.
but then they just seemed to disappear on me.
Yeah, little carp.
Maybe I should have put a bit more ground bait in to attract some more in. But like I say, it got a bit messy when I put ground bait in. Maybe I should have just put some ground bait in and dealt with it, because at least it was bringing fish into the peg.
Oh,
Keeping that meat going in down the middle. At some point, hopefully, that'll kick in. And I started throwing a little bit of meat to my right as well. The edges on this peg are quite deep. There's no shallow water on the insides at all. Like I say, I did find some shallow water over, but I just got fed up of trying to present the rig with the wind. It was gusty and it was just sending my rig up the bank and everything, and I just got fed up with it. So I just decided to leave it alone. There didn't seem to be many fish over there early on anyway. I think they were all on the insides doing their business. I'd go in and catch 2 or 3 fish down the edge just to keep me interested. But I felt miles off the pace, to be fair. Kev Dennis to my left, he started catching over early. Wind wasn't catching him so much down there though. It's quite sheltered down there. And then he got on his short line and he started catching on that quite early as well. But I'd tried it a couple of times and all I had was one indication which resulted in a foul up fish.
A fish!
I'm giving it another look now, see if there's anything turned up. And first drop in, I hook a carp. And I'm praying there's a few there. Decent carp of around £4. Unfortunately, that was the only fish there, so back down the edges and just see if I can keep a few fish going into the net while I wait for something else to turn up. Look, so I was catching the odd fish. It was never brilliant, but it was, it kept me interested. I really struggled to figure out what to do for the best, to be honest. And I'd pretty much resigned myself to the fact that to do any good, I'd need to catch on the meat short and hope that their fish would turn up on that caster shallow line. Now, I tried it loads of times on that caster line and nothing happened. But then all of a sudden, I've had a bite on it. And I thought, here we go, maybe. I'm fishing around 15 inches deep, just into the weed bed, or just into the edge of the weed bed. Fishing a short lash on a short stop kit. The slightest of lifts hooks the fish. A half decent F1. There's around 3 hours of the match left here, and I'm thinking if these turn up now, I can have a right go. There's 3 hours of the match left here now, and I'm thinking if these have turned up proper, I could end up with a right weight. But it never really worked out like that. You'd have 2 or 3 fish if you were lucky, and then they'd back off, so you'd have to go and do something else. It's nice, easy fishing, that shallow line down the edge. Throwing some casters there. Once you've got your depth set right, so if you're missing bites, you shallow up slightly. Not much, you don't need to go by much, you just do it a bit at a time until you get clean bites. Once you start getting clean bites, you don't miss them. Like I say, you just have 2 or 3 fish on the shallow line and then you'd have to go somewhere else. I'm just hoping they've turned up on this meat line. I had hopes of rotating these 2 lines until one of them kicked in proper. Now I'm happy now because I'm starting to get bites on the short line as well. So I'm just going to keep feeding meat on that line and feeding casters down that edge and just keep switching between the two and just keep picking fish off. Like I say, it was probably just over 3 hours into the match now. And I probably only got about 12, 15 fish in the first 3 hours. But now my match has really started. I felt I was miles off the pace. The bloke that's on 24, which is the old 34, was catching steady. And Kev Dennis to my left on peg 20 was catching ever so well on the short line. And I just felt like I was miles off the pace. But I'm catching fish now, so I'm not that bothered. You can see there I'm moving my stots about, putting them back in place. I have tried my best to make shot work. I just cannot get on with shot. Can't get on with it. Even last week I set up a rig with shots and I just can't get on with it. So I just keep using the stots. I know it's a pain at times, but they never come off. Sometimes you got to move them about, put them back in position, but you never have stots come off. Now I could start building a weight now. Now I finally feel there's some fish in the peg and I'm feeding. That one unhooked himself for me. I just check everything hasn't moved with that coming off. Because sometimes you can get some movement when it pings back like that. Having some banter with Steve Williamson behind me. He's drew peg 16, which is like the old 23. Again, that's not a very good draw. It's a peg I drew the last time I was here on the Moors Masters. Now I've just foul hooked a fish there, so that's a sign to get off it. It's the fish are unsettled, so leave that alone a bit, get back on the shallow line, and hope that there's some more turned up there. So I've gone in and I've missed a couple of bites. That's telling me I'm fishing too deep. So I pull it back, take a couple of inches off the depth, drop back in. And bang, I've got the depth right again. They've just moved up slightly in the water. You can build a weight pretty quickly doing this, and I'll need to build a weight quickly. Well, I've gone that line, I've had that one fish, and they've backed off again. So back on the short line, hopefully they've settled back down there again, and they have, so happy days. And just keep pinching a few fish off each line and keep some fish going into the net. Single 6mm piece of meat. I'm throwing 4 or 5 pieces in 2 lots when I drop the rig in. That's the only time I feed. I feed as I put the rig in, and I'll feed as I hook a fish. Typical British weather. Wind's brought some rain in, so coats on. Still not cold, it's a lovely day. The temperature's nice, it's just I'm getting wet now. I did worry about the cameras a little bit. It does get a bit of water on the lenses, but with the wind it clears up pretty quick. Keep those casters going in on that edge line and keep throwing meat down that middle.
Watch me.
It seems that the fish have finished the spawning now because there's no fish crashing around anywhere on the lake now, and there's more fish being caught, so they've had a bit of nookie. Now they're hungry. It was a difficult match to start with, but it's gone ever so nice now. There's fish to be caught on most. Everybody's catching some fish now. Starting to enjoy this match now. But like I say, I'm playing catch up. Depends on whether I can get that shallow line working properly. as to whether I catch up or not. But in the meantime, I'm just going to keep rotating the two lines, short and shallow. While I'm getting bites off a line, I'll stay with it.
And I've got them for ages.
If I start getting any missed bites or any silly indications on this meat line, I'll come off it and I'll try the other line. It's quite enjoyable at the minute. With the odd carp coming in as well. Never hooked any of the big carp that's in there. But everything's welcome. This one ain't quite had enough. Quickly stick some sections back on. And then a few more. Settle down again now. Keep trickling the meat in and the casters. Always remember to keep your pole low when you're shipping fish back. It does help to get them towards you quicker. I found out why he was fighting so hard. He was hooked in the wing. But he's in the spray bag now. When I say wing, I mean the pectoral fin.
Oh, my phone. Shit.
I'm using 11 Duraslip on this line. Well, I use 11 Duraslip on both the lines. When I elasticate the short stop kits for shallow fishing, I use one pack to do two top kits. So when I'm doing the short stop kits, I open a packet, I cut it in half, and one will go in each of the top kits. It might seem a little bit on the tight side when you first do it, but it soon wears in. I'm quite enjoying myself now. There's a few fish to be caught. It's so much better than it was in the first half of the match. Seems to be quite a few fish on that short line. And every time it goes a little bit iffy, you get back on the caster line and pull some fish off there as well. I am hoping that the shallow line becomes the better line, to be honest, because I can catch them quicker there when they am there. And I'm enjoying myself now. Back on the shallow line, a few fish there again. Happy days. This one's having none of it. And the fair stamp fish as well. There's a few there now. Just hope I can keep them coming there. This is the way to build a real big white. Nice and steady fishing now. It's getting interesting. Got some energy this one. In the net. Incidentally, the rig on this line has got a 4B8 F1 shallow tied to 018 Akipower main line, and it's got an 014 Akipower hook length with a size 18 GPMB and a medium band, and the caster slides into that lovely. I experimented a bit with the shotting pattern, so it worked best with most of the shot under the float and just a couple of droppers. And on that short line, I'm fishing a F1 maggot in a 4x12. Again, I'm using our 18 AccuPower main line to a size 014 hook length, and I'm using a size 16 GPMB on that. And the shotting pattern, I'll start with a shirt button style shotting pattern in the last 14-15 inches of the rig, and then I can change that, as the bites dictate. If I start getting some bites on the drop, I'll move to a bulk and some droppers, and I'll move the bulk further away from the hook length. As it happens, on the day I did start getting some silly bites, and I felt that they was coming off the bottom, so I did try fishing off the bottom for them. I had a shallow rig set at around 3 foot deep, and I tried that and never had an indication on it. So I tried another rig which was around 4 or 5 inches off the bottom, and I never had a bite on that either. So it was obvious they weren't off the bottom, they were messing about close to the bottom. So I dropped it in, missed a bite again. The meat came off, so I laid the rig back in without no bait on, just to see what was happening, and I never had an indication. So they weren't liners, they definitely weren't liners, because without nothing on the hook, the rig never moved. So in the end, I decided to up the feed, and that worked a treat, to be fair. Here's another carp. This time on the shallow rig. I didn't hook many carp on the shallow line, but they give a good of account of themselves when you do. You have to be a little more careful when you come on the short stop, because you just got to remember you haven't got as much of elastic in there, so your elastic will bottom out quicker. So you got to be prepared to ship out quick if they bottom your elastic out. This one would move my bead up the line, because I'm not using a Dacron on this line. On my shallow rigs, I don't tend to use Dacrons. I just put the rig behind a knot in the elastic and pull a bead over the top of it, so as it's more direct. And there's another one. Good fishing now. This one's unhooked himself for me as well, bless him. At times that shallow line was fantastic, but they never stayed long. If they stayed like this for the last hour or so, you could do a phenomenal weight, but it just never happened. You'd only catch 2 or 3, and then you'd have to move again. And some of them were a real good stamp. And like I say, there was a couple of carp mixed in as well. If anything though, the carp slow you down. Because they're not that much bigger than the F1s. They just take so much longer to get them out. But I do love catching carp. And there's another one. And he's decided to go for a swim down the pool. Now this one had a little bit of a swim around where I was catching before he decided to go down the pool. Keeping that meat going in on the short line as well. Just trying to get back in that weed bed. I don't want this happening because that's where I've got all my fish lined up on the shallow line. This could potentially spook them all. He's really not happy either. Thought I had to put some more carbon on this one, but I managed to get him back under control. Another lovely looking carp. Luckily it never damaged the line where I was catching and there were still fish there. See how much quicker it is to get an F1 in than it is to get a carp in. He says. Another nice stamp F1. Not long of the match left now. Nice and easy. I'd got several shallow rigs set up for the day. I carry them in my top kit case, already done up. That was the second longest rig I'd got on the bank. I'd got some really short rigs in case the fish came right up underneath them weed beds, but I only caught on this one rig all day, to be fair. With the odd tweak here and there, just taking an inch or two off or putting an inch or two on. I did have to keep messing about at times to keep in contact with the fish, but I never had to move it far. I backed off a little bit towards the end, so I've gone back down the middle to see if I could get a nice run going there. And there was a few fish there to be caught as well. Now we're getting really late in the match now, and I'm trying to get a bit, trying to get my rig back in a bit quicker here. So I unhook the fish, get my rebait up, get it out there, drop the fish in, and I'm already fishing. And then I hook a fish, and I'm playing it while the whistle goes. And it ends up being a carp. The last fish of the day was a carp.
Fish on.
No rush here now, the match is over. I want to make sure this ends up in the net. So when I come the end of the match, weighed 116 pounds and 7 ounces. Now going into the last 3 hours, I got 12 to 15 fish, and during the last 3 hours, I've added another 40 fish. So I've ended up with 52 fish. I think 4 of them were carp, none of them were big carp, and the rest were F1s. I did have one 2 pound skimmer, which I caught out the right edge on a piece of corn, which was as big as some of the F1s I caught. Kev Dennis to my left weighed 80 pound. I thought he got loads more than me. Just shows what I know. And the chap on peg 24 weighed 104 pounds. So I'd done okay in the end, but it wasn't enough to win the section, as 128 pound won the section. Best weight in the match was 199 pound, I think it was, off peg 5 on bridge. So much room on there. There was only 5 anglers on the whole pool. And Daz Johnson made the most off peg 5, catching on meat shallow on the short line. Fair play, mate. Our pool was won with 165 pound off the other end of the pool, peg 2. I was never going to compete with that, but I was hoping I could sneak the section, and it never happened. Never mind. Still an enjoyable day on the bank. So if you enjoyed watching that and you'd like to see more, please give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one. And don't forget to subscribe. Cheers.